I'm still Kevin Lavelle, and this is still how you sell without selling out. Rogers that.
Hi, everybody. I'm Rogers Healy, and welcome to Rogers That, a podcast dedicated to selling without selling out. Today is a big day. We have Saturday Night Live, edifies people like Alec Baldwin and Steve Martin for being Paul Simon, being a 10-time host club. Today, we have the first second-time guest on the podcast, and no one would be a better second-time person than one of my best friends, one of my heroes, somebody that I look up to in every definition other than literally because he's shorter than me.
Much.
Not by much.
Much.
The epitome of a founder's founder, the epitome of a grinder, the epitome of a visionary. His name is Kevin Lavelle. Kevin and I met a long time ago, and through a lot of just awesome serendipity, I was able to be a part of his first go-round company called Mizzen+Main. Still wear it every single day, have for 14 years almost. Every single day. You'll never see me in public without a Mizzen+Main shirt on. You can always tell by the blue buttonhole, unless it's a t-shirt. He is a multi-time founder, including Mizzen+Main, which we talked about. But now he's the co-founder, and CEO of a company that hits a little bit closer to home than Mizzen for a lot of reasons, one of which is I'm a 2-time girl dad. And by the time this airs, people might even find out that we have another kid on the way. Harbor is a groundbreaking baby monitor that redefines sleep, sanity, and security. If you zoom in, you'll see that I need all three of those. He's one of the most impressive founders and leaders I've ever met. I had the privilege of meeting him while he was at SMU, and a genuine friendship sparked. And through that, I think we've been through a lot together. We've learned a lot together. We've supported each other. But I think you find out who your real friends are when things are not always just going great. And we've both been through versions of that where it's a brotherhood. And I think that when you find somebody like that, you got to cling to them because that's when you need them the most. So he's always been ahead of the curve. He defines what it means to be a true leader. And I'm just so honored to help share his story about Harbor because I heard about it. And within half a second, I was like, I'm in. And just like anything that Kevin would do, you're in. And in the world of raising money, and I'll be done, raising money is really hard. But sometimes you can raise money just based off someone's name. And I sent a group text to some of my friends that are fans of Kevin and fans of Mizzen, had no idea what Harbor was. And within a half a second, they're like, I'm in. And then the snowball continued to roll. So we're super excited to be a part of this and super excited to have you back.
Thank you. Second-time guest, not a second-time listener.
Well, look at that. How about that? Okay, on the spot, what's your favorite podcast we've done other than yours?
Obviously mine.
And not Whitney.
No, that was my answer, was Whitney. Whitney and Miracle Mama. Whitney is amazing. I love her story and her passion for what she's doing. And, you asked me to go grab coffee with her, and I honestly had no idea what I was walking into. You just said, you got to meet Whitney. And I thought it was going to be about, feedback for Harbor or something. And I heard what she was building, and it's amazing to see how much progress she's made already. And as a parent, and she's got many kids, it's a lot of work to do both of those things. Yeah. I was talking with somebody last night about scheduling a meeting or something, and they had a very light schedule. And I said, "Do you have kids under 10? Because if you don't, you have no idea what busy is." Yeah. And when you see what she's been able to do, it's just awesome. So I am going to pick that,
and that's approved. So we can kind of breeze through the get to know you questions, but here's something. I'm a second-time founder myself, and the journey of Mizzen to Harbor. Who was Kevin Lavelle pre-Harbor? Who is Kevin Lavelle now?
So I started Mizzen+Main in 2012. I had a crazy idea for a dress shirt made out of performance fabric. Thank you for always wearing it so well. It's just now topping 60 degrees here, so I'm surprised you still have your vest. I had to take mine off because
it's because I'm wearing a trim fit. My armpits are sweating.
All of those things.
That's unfortunate mittens.
All of those things. And so that business, we had an unbelievable ride. We've done hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. We're carried in almost 1,000 stores around the country. Got to learn a lot about building a product and a brand and raising money and doing celebrity endorsements. And this idea for Harbor has been with me since my son was born. My son just turned 8 a couple months ago.
Shout out to Jack.
Shout out Jack. And I this idea has been with me for a very long time, just like Mizzen+Main, which was, why in the world has no one done this? Why do parents or why do consumers not have a better choice? And there are so many reasons not to pursue building this. I just couldn't shake it. It stayed with me literally since the time that our Nanit failed on us.
Did you think like along the way, like founders have to be crazy, like you have to. And you said something before we started. It's like founders started because I think it's going to be easy.
Yeah, we do this not because it is easy, but because we thought it would be easy.
And then
I thought it was going to be easier the second time around.
A tech company in a competitive space that again, you're the Mizzen+Main guy. Right, you're the guy that pioneered dry fit dress shirts, and everybody knows you through that.
Yep.
Right, and then you want to go into a completely different arena.
Yeah, the very different experience from the first time to the second time, obviously, is I've experienced it once before, but fundamentally, I can get not anyone, but I can get most people to respond or engage with me because they'll see, oh, I built a company and there's something meaningful there, so they'll entertain the call. And with Mizzen+Main, most people told me, that's dumb and you're dumb for pursuing it before I started. And there you go. And then with Harbor, it's been a lot of like, that's interesting. Clearly, you're not an idiot because you've made it this far. But there's, again, a lot of reasons not to pursue things. I will say, it has been very difficult to build a product. It's working really well. We've shipped thousands of devices. People love the product. We're growing our omnichannel distribution. Sure, there are aspects of that have been harder than expected. The thing that's been very different is just in the last couple of years, raising capital. It's a very capital-intensive business to start. Once we do it and once we get that penetration in the market and once we're out there, I think that we will be able to build a really good engine. And that's a big part of what we're doing. But the journey over the last couple of years raising money has just been very, very difficult. And obviously, you've been on this journey with me. People will say, we want to invest in an entrepreneur with an idea that's going to change the way the world works. And, I walk in and I'm like, hey, I've done this once before. Look at what I have. Let's do this together. And they're like, not like that. Or call me next time. Call me at the next round. Call me after you launch. Call me 6 months after you launch. And at each time that you call them back, they're like, next time you should call me the next time. And that was eye-opening and frustrating, especially because when I went into it, I talked to a lot of people in the startup and venture space. And they sort of just gave me this vision of, with my background, this will be relatively straightforward to raise money for. I didn't raise venture capital for Mizzen+Main. It was angel capital and then private equity. And the world changed, and that's the nature of it. But to your point about founders, we think it will be easy, and we're a little crazy. I'm so convicted in the idea that started this company and how it has morphed and grown and improved, and the team that we've built, that we persist. We find the way through. No matter what it takes, we find a way. The other biggest difference between Mizzen+Main and Harbor is with Mizzen+Main, I thought about it for years. It took me about a year to figure out even how to do it, but I was kind of moonlighting and I had a full-time job and I was just trying to kind of figure it out after hours. And, I eventually decided to start Mizzen+Main, bought 1,000 dress shirts and got to work and started selling shirts. But I had no kids. My wife had a full-time job keeping us afloat as a family. And I had some savings and I just went out and tried to sell some shirts. And with Harbor, to build two very complex pieces of electronics with very high cybersecurity and uptime requirements, and they have to work. There's no MVP of this product. Like, we did that and we tested along the way, of course, but you can't launch that product to the public. It has to be basically perfect. It is many, many, many millions of dollars to launch this. And so I started working on this really in earnest in the summer of 22, found a great co-founder, Charlie. And then it was September of 24 that we started shipping mass production to customers. That's a very different experience.
Yeah. Which you just answered a lot of questions at once, but just from a fan perspective and someone that admires, the pivot or you fall in love with something different, and you're like me, like if you have interest in something, you have to explore it.
Yes.
Right. Was the path to getting deep into it a quicker one? Like, I feel like being a husband and a father, like you have to become lethal with your time.
Yeah.
Not that you weren't before, not that maybe I wasn't either. But again, did you do enough research, or did you like, this is my idea. I have to go and go through it, because if not, people said absolutely not. Tech, baby, SaaS, all that stuff. What was that like?
I would say I spent probably 3 solid months just exploring how to make this happen. Talking to other hardware founders, talking to other tech founders, talking to venture investors who could potentially invest, but also some who I just had relationships with. And, it became clear there were a lot of reasons why this was going to be very, very, very difficult. And I think that is a really good thing. Because if people said, oh yeah, that would be easy, X, Y, and Z, here you go. People told me I'd have an easier time raising capital, but generally it's a brutally difficult thing to execute, which to me says that's great, because the competition is not going to be, there's not 1,000 other options that you can choose from. The leading options are terrible in the baby monitor space. And that's why I know that I can do something better. And it's so capital intensive and so difficult and so many reasons to say no, that almost everyone is going to not try to do this.
It goes back to the twisted manic. You got to be psychotic to be a real founder.
Yeah.
And you've done it before, right?
Yeah.
And you again, you reinvented the men's dress shirt experience. And I'm sure you learned stuff along the way where maybe you launched SKUs too early, or maybe you relied too heavily on celebrities, et cetera. And, that again makes you maybe skittish or maybe more efficient the second go round.
Yeah, I'm able to make decisions, I think, more effectively. I'm able to contemplate some of the longer term consequences very differently. With Mizzen+Main, we were, after about 3 years, things really started to just rip. We were on an absolute tear. Mm-hmm. And one of our, actually it was my first employee, Kristen Smith, she came to me and said, hey, so I looked at the numbers and we're not going to have any inventory in, call it 8 weeks. Because we're selling so fast now that we're not going to have any inventory. And for 3 years, I basically bought some, I sold it, and at a certain point in time said, well, I should probably order some more inventory. And then you just kind of keep doing that. And then we started ripping, and it was like, oh my gosh, if she hadn't actually done that work to figure out when we were going to stock out, then we managed to keep it together. And now with something like very expensive, very complex inventory, our lead times are much longer. We have to be much more selective in how we do it. But things like inventory planning and financing, I have seen that once before. And so I'm able to anticipate some of those challenges very differently. Easier
or harder with something like this?
It is both. And I hate when people answer the question that way. But
well, let me ask you, what's lead time for apparel? Like how far in advance do you need to pick apparel?
And again, there's no simple answer here, because with Mizzen+Main, we work with wholesale vendors who want to stock our product in their stores. We live in Dallas. St. Bernard's is a great example. They're a great partner of ours. We show them the product that we are planning on making at the trade shows 9 months ahead of time. And then we get orders from them that help us figure out how much we want to go pursue. And then, of course, we have our own conviction and our own website that we're going to sell. And so the lead time is longer based on the cycles of the industry, not necessarily the cycles of the product that you're going to make. And so the lead times in apparel aren't actually that long, but it's a question of you're planning for spring of 26 in the fall of 24. Mm-hmm. And not starting the process then, but there are things that begin to take hold. The design process, new fabrics that you're tweaking and playing with. And so it's a very long cycle. It's not actually that long from the time you hit go to the time you get the product, but you're constantly iterating and designing, and you're figuring out what your wholesale vendors want. And you have a ton of SKUs and sizes, and every time you try and think about how many smalls or XL should we order, you're wrong. And so you're constantly adjusting that. With Harbor, we have 2 SKUs. We have a camera and a monitor. From a SKU simplicity perspective, it's beautiful. But from a supply chain, there are thousands of parts that go into each of these products. And the complexity of building the boards and the lead times, and also in electronics, we are a very small supplier to most of our vendors for a meaningful period of time. And so our lead times are much longer because we're not that important to them. And so you've got to start making your bets earlier. And the inventory to buy this product at cost is many, 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 many more times expensive than a shirt. And so your capital commitments look a lot different too.
Do different emotions come into play with something like this, right? Like again, in apparel, I don't know what I don't know, but it's like, you hope it fits, you hope they like it. If they don't, they return it. But with this, it's like if you screw up something, like you're toast.
Yeah.
Right. So what was the process like as a founder, as a user, as a dad, as a husband?
Yeah.
You know, at what point you're like, okay, go. Right. Like what did you find yourself psyching yourself out knowing that there might be one iteration someone doesn't like, or the color, or the, you know, the sound, the volume? Like at what point did you just go, okay, we've got it?
So this was a part of the initial exploration prior to starting Harbor, was understanding what that looked like, because I knew that I knew nothing about the space. And so I have an unbelievable mentor and advisor, a guy named Chris Rill, who started Canary, which was an early competitor to Dropcam. So he built an IP camera and went through the whole journey. And there were wins and real challenges in his journey that he helped me understand. And so in the process of building hardware, you have multiple design cycles and iterations. And so we spent about a year before we started building and designing this physical product with the guts of a camera and all of the software and the firmware to understand some of the final physical requirements that would be required in the device.
God.
So there's a lot of work that goes
in your head. You're like, it's going to take a year before we see something, or were you like?
I loosely understood that.
Yeah.
Charlie, my co-founder, Sean, our head of hardware, some of our advisors, we had a really good understanding of that, because we had to know that in order to go raise our pre-seed capital. What milestones were we going to hit? How long were things going to take? Once we started, we had the full specs of what do we want this actual camera and the actual monitor to look like from an overall kind of structure and physical requirements. Then we found just a fantastic freelance industrial designer to help us design what do we want it to look like, and how do we think about when it sits on the edge of a table, how far do we want it to point down, and what are the benefits and pros and cons of a physical movement versus some are electronic, like you can control it from your phone and decide if you want it to move. There were a lot of design decisions that went into it before we started the first prototype.
Enjoyable or no?
Largely, yeah. I enjoyed it because we're thinking through all of the pain points that we felt as parents using the product. So Wi-Fi cameras like Nanit or Owlet have an enormous number of drawbacks. And so we solved that with the dual use modality of a camera and a monitor that don't require internet. But then as somebody who's traveled with kids, you can't use these Wi-Fi cameras. And so you buy the old school junky, I'm not going to besmirch a brand name. I'll say it. Motorola, Vava, Summer, Infant Optics, whatever. Those companies, when you set it on the edge of a table to look down at a crib, they only go down just a little bit. So you can't see inside the crib. And so then you got to stack a bunch of books and you got to kind of tilt it, and the camera's just sort of wobbling on the side so that you can actually see inside the crib. And so we went through like a month-long process of what are the angles and how far can you get the tilt and what happens at the extreme bend. And that was fun because we're like, if we get this right, people are going to sing its praises, and so far they have, because these are the problems that we felt as parents. Another example is it's a screw-off design piece. So you can mount this on the wall and then put the camera on there. And then when you want to travel, you leave this mounted on the wall, and then you take this with you when you travel. Because when you mount things on the wall as a parent and you have to then travel with it, but you've got to unscrew the whole plate and you got to do all this work to bring it with you. Every time I had to do that, it was just like one more reason that traveling with kids was so hard. And these small wins, if we can get that right. So a lot of that went into the design process. And then, the form factor of what this looks like, I would say we were probably 98% there. And then you start iterating with the actual manufacturer with things like how many holes are on the speaker on the back. And initially, I think we had more. And then from how do you machine the parts and what happens with the plastics and how easy is to break, you start to go through some tests. And now I'm going to truncate it, but basically you go through some machining and tooling tests before you actually make the machines and tools. So you do some 3D printed things before you get to needing to actually machine the parts. Because once you get to the point of what you want to make tools so that you can mass print the parts rather than individually print. And then you make effectively 10 so that you can get lots of feedback to then go make the parts to make 100. And then the first run, you make 100, but you're doing it effectively one at a time to validate and test the process. And then now okay, we're ready to go make 1,000. And so knowing what that process was, we knew it's probably about 2 years. We knew loosely what the cost would be with the manufacturers. And as with nearly every business plan and nearly every complex manufacturing quote, you can be 100% certain that the quote is not going to be correct. It's going to take longer. It's going to cost more. You're going to run into problems. You thought you could do it this way and you've got to redo it. So that's why you want to do as much work ahead of time as possible. Frankly, making mistakes along the way, which a lot of other hardware founders have done, is why hardware has fallen so far out of favor. Because if you invest $5 million to get the prototypes to the point where you're into mass production, just using round numbers, and you were wrong about some of your initial assumptions, you're toast. And so this is why I spent so much time with advisors and talked to every hardware founder who could tell me every pitfall that they went through to avoid those problems. And then we brought on great contractors on an hourly, monthly basis, and then hired the right people to make sure that we could avoid those pitfalls. And we knew it's going to be more expensive. We're going to be wrong on some level of something along the way. But if you can minimize those errors to as few as possible, you dramatically increase your likelihood for success. And then also just kind of learning along the way, I definitely will not pick on anyone individually. There are some hardware companies that just were very, very, very confident that their design aesthetic was going to be the most beautiful thing ever and command this massive premium. And so they made the most complicated thing possible. And then it was more expensive, more difficult to make, more likely to break, and their company was toast. And with us, it was like, we need to nail the utility. We need to make sure we get that, the functionality and the execution right. And then we'll make sure that it's a beautiful product. But we can sacrifice where we put the button, as opposed to some industrial designer conducted this thing and this is how a button should make you feel when you touch it. And well, actually, you just wasted $1 million and you sunk your company because you made something meaningfully more complex. So as an example, in the back of the monitor, we've got this kickstand because we know that people are going to move the monitor around and want to look at it in different capacities in different ways. We tried a few different things before we moved into manufacturing, and we needed to make some electrical engineering concessions to make it work from this is exactly what we want it to look like. Okay, well, that's going to cost you an extra $300,000 in moving parts of the electrical engineering around. Well, okay, then let's do it this other way. And that's okay. It wasn't the design and the industrial designer who drove every decision. It was, we need to make a product that solves these problems and is still very aesthetically pleasing and beautiful, but not from the other way around. And I think that's where some of the biggest mistakes have come in the industry. And frankly, the mistakes and failures in the industry are part of why it's been so hard to break into the industry, because people don't want to invest in something that you can touch anymore.
On the human side of things, what have you learned about yourself, maybe in the last 7-8 months, where again, he's Kevin Lavelle, right? It's he's gonna figure this thing out. But even on the investing side, right? Was that a surprise to you? What's been some of the life lessons you've learned that you can apply, as you grow forward as a leader?
Certainly, it's a cliche, but the division of labor. Charlie, as my co-founder, we have a great working relationship. He is a great engineer. He's a great person. He's a great leader of his team. He's built the team on the engineering side and the product side. I spend very little of my energy or calories on the product. This is what I want us to build, and these are the problems that we're going to solve. And there were a lot of discussions about the tilt, but I'm not in all the engineering meetings, and I'm not getting sucked into a lot of time in the company that isn't where I should be spending my time. And that was a lesson I learned from the first time and has helped me, I think, retain some of my sanity, where I can try and go use my limited time, my limited resources, and my limited bandwidth on the things where I can create the most value and where I should be spending my time. that's on the business and how it flows into personal. On the personal side, from the first go around to the second go around, just being much more realistic about my family and the need for sleep. I know that if I'm answering emails at midnight, I'm not going to be able to be effective and productive the next day. And there are some people that are. I don't understand it. They're built differently than me. It doesn't work. And you can feel a sense of guilt and a sense of shame that I'm not grinding 24/7. If I do, I'm not lasting very long. And my wife and I have both had some health issues over the last couple of years. And I'm very proud of what we've built. I'm very confident we will change people's lives. And I'm very dedicated to seeing the success of what we've done for our customers, our investors, and our team.
Let's talk about that real quick.
But I'll close that out with my wife and kids are more important.
Amen.
And I'm not going to say I didn't know that the first time. There were versions of that I learned and didn't have quite right. But when I started Mizzen+Main, I didn't have kids. And it's so much.
You had me.
I had a baby to deal with. It's so much harder to know, when I'm spending time with my kids, there's 100 other things that I should be doing for the business. And that's a hard thing to balance that you just don't have to deal with when you don't have kids. And so working consistently, I have not figured this out, but working consistently it's okay. Shut it down. I'm not wearing my Apple Watch right now, but one of the reasons I got an Apple Watch is so that I can remind myself of something and leave my phone somewhere else.
Smart.
And so I can just say, hey, Siri, remind me to email Rogers back about X, Y, and Z at 8 p.m. And that way I can allow myself to not immediately revert to what's my email? What should I be doing? What should I be doing? And knowing that there are crises that are always going to happen and we'll do our best.
Shout out to Athena, by the way.
Shout out to Athena. Athena
what's up?
Is a game changer. One of my friends now, Jonathan Swanson, built Athena. He was former founder of Thumbtack. And finding great talent and finding great resources. Athena is a great EA company. They hire brilliant folks in the Philippines who help manage email and life and everything. And I'm so glad that you came on to the Athena train.
Life changing. Okay, so the experience of feeling like you're really a part of something. And I'm sure that the first person said, you've changed my life. We slept better. Like what has that been like versus being like, I love your shirts, dude. Like I'm not sweating as much walking to my office.
So with Mizzen+Main, it was awesome it's so great to see it out in the wild. Because of the blue buttonhole, we've been able to spot celebrities wearing it that we didn't know had the product.
Oh,
celebrities like Rogers.
Oh, wow. We were watching Love is Blind last night, and they were on their first date on a boat. And I was like, pause. He's wearing a Mizzen+Main shirt.
Yes. Yeah. Someone else sent me, someone was wearing the hat. So that's awesome. It's fun. It's great. And I'm very proud of what we've done at Mizzen and what the team continues to do. But we aren't substantially changing someone's life. With with Harbor, parents are telling us things like, you've given me hope to have a third child. I haven't slept this well since my first trimester.
There's going to be so many babies named Kevin and Lavelle.
Well, if we could just get Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce to get married and have kids, I think we would unleash the modern day baby boom. That is what my hope is. I really had no dog in the fight on the Chiefs-Eagles game. I didn't really care. But I honestly was leaning towards the Chiefs so that Kelce might propose on the field afterwards. Golly. And I wonder if this is like a split in the timeline, like a fracture in...
By the time this airs, I was like, Taylor Swift just had her second baby.
It'd be amazing.
And she's running for president.
I think things ebb and flow. I do think that people talk about the vibe shift in 2025. I think we've talked a little bit about this, people are coming back to religion in ways that they hadn't before. People are reprioritizing families, reprioritizing patriotism. I think that the decline in birth rate, Harbor may be able to help bend that back up. And how amazing would that be? If we can make it easier to be a parent and we can change some of the dialogue that people say, oh, you'll never sleep again. Well, yeah, it's hard and it's exhausting. It's also the most rewarding thing in the world. And if we can make it a little bit easier to help your kids sleep through the night, what a beautiful thing that will be.
Talk to me about pricing. Again, you launched this thing and it's such a different model than a shirt or really any true consumer product. So the iteration of figuring out, here's where we're going to land. We have subscription, all that stuff. What was that journey like?
So before we started, we obviously did a lot of customer research, and you and I both wear our Whoops and love Whoop. Shout out Will Ahmed. Thanks for building Whoop. We talked to a lot of different people and ultimately said, you know what, let's try the Whoop model. And it's not the Whoop model specifically, but let's try the subscription model. And we tried it. We launched a pre-sale, and people don't really pre-order baby monitors, so we didn't really have a lot of data. But when we finally started launching and shipping, we had so many questions about the subscription. What's included? What's not included? What happens if I don't want to renew? And it was the single biggest point of friction that we had in our customer service portal. And so we said, you know what? Let's launch a lifetime option where you do not have to ever renew anything. You just pay all up front, one time, never have to worry about anything. And our customer service inquiries on subscriptions went to 0. And very quickly, 40% of people were buying the lifetime option. It was a really good test to run.
Was that a humbling experience to have that just come up and you had to change it immediately? Not humbling, but...
Yeah, no, I know what you're saying. For me, it's more of, this is the benefit of being a second-time founder. I'm not so convinced of every single idea that I have. Like, I'm convicted in long-term vision, but hey, we might have to pivot. And in e-commerce, every millisecond that you take away from someone clicking buy, you're losing out on significant revenue. And in early days, it's not necessarily, thousands of customers. As you grow, the numbers grow. But in the early days, every dollar is so important. And so we said, we need to remove friction. We were pretty certain that this was going to work really well and people were going to be happy about it. And there was a lot of business models built around it. And then we said, we got to make a change. And customers told us that this is what they wanted. And mostly you should listen to your customers. Sometimes you need to ignore them because they can steer you in a very wrong direction. But what we were hearing was, this is confusing and is preventing me from jumping into your very great solution. And then about a month later, maybe less, we said, you know what? Let's just remove any doubt, remove any pause, any hesitation. We know that people like it at the lifetime membership price. So let's do the lifetime membership. And so it was the November of last year. So it was only 2 months into shipping. We said, we're doing away with the membership model. And the people that were on the membership, we'll have to figure out what the delta looks like, and we'll get there. But it was a great opportunity for us to pivot very quickly without changing the offering that we had to our customers, but we just made it simpler for people to buy. And our vision for how we build lifetime value with customers long-term is certainly the first product, but then we can help you with the remote night nanny. We can help you with telehealth. There's a lot of things that we will do over time that there will be additional opportunities for us to create value and receive value from customers.
Okay, I've got to ask a couple cliche questions, and then we're going to land the plane with the final thoughts on Harbor. Best advice you give to someone now versus the Kevin that was all in on Mizzen+Main?
So when I started Mizzen+Main and when I started Harbor, I feel like most people are basically going to say, you're crazy. That's stupid. You shouldn't do it. It's going to be too hard. And thankfully, when I started Mizzen+Main, it was just like, I don't care. I'm going to go do this. When I started Harbor, I thought it was going to be a little bit easier than this, but it's still been great. My biggest advice to people is, are you ready to spend a decade of your life on this and for it to be 100 times harder than you think? Because entrepreneurship, right around the time I started Mizzen+Main, a little before, sort of became this like, it's sexy, rock star, like entrepreneurs, athletes want to be entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Whereas before, everyone wanted to be a pro athlete. Now it's like, oh, I want to be an entrepreneur. And the odds of success are much lower than trying to be a pro athlete. The advice for kids wanting to be a pro athlete is like, go for it, but plan that you will not be. Like, build a life that you won't actually make it, because almost no one does. The odds are even lower in entrepreneurship. Also, there are different types of entrepreneurship. You can start a restaurant. You can start a servicing company. You can buy a company. You don't have to try and build a company that can do eventually hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue. And so I'm not going to tell anyone whether or not they should. But if people really want my advice, I'm going to ask them a couple questions, and I can probably determine, are you actually committed to doing this, or do you just really think you want to do it? And so be prepared to spend a decade of your life and for it to be a lot harder. And the sacrifices you make along the way are not, oh, it's really hard, or it's going to like beat you down and you're going to have to work longer hours. All of those things are true. But for years, my wife and I had no money. And at Christmas time, we would make each other something. For our family, one year, we made soap. We bought a soap making kit and made them soap. And sure, it's the thought that counts and all of those things. But like for years and years and years, the stress of not a steady paycheck, and that if anything goes wrong, you're the first one that suffers and you don't bring any income in. And you may end up with those liabilities yourself, right? Signing personal guarantees to be able to access lines of credit. Those are things that you just never have to even think about in the world of being a W-2 employee. And also things like you're going to be the one that gets sued. Not you pass the lawsuit to your legal team. Yeah. You're the one that gets sued.
All the fun stuff.
It's all the fun stuff. And I think for me, this is what I should do. And you mentioned some version of this earlier. Maslow talks about what one can be, one must be. If this is what you're meant to do, you will always feel out of alignment that you're not doing it. And it doesn't mean that if you do it and you fail, that was not the right choice. And maybe you have to pivot, but like, at least you tried. At least you know. We're on this earth for a very short time. You might as well try and do something great. And then the last very relevant piece to this is, even if you absolutely know that you should be an entrepreneur and maybe your health or your financial situation or your family situation or the broader world situation, maybe it's not the right time. And you may have to wait on that dream because you have to take care of a parent or you have to take care of a kid. And so understand what your priorities are, even if it might mean you have to sacrifice parts of your dream.
Tell you what, man, you were a lot of wisdom rolled into one. Last question. Best way to support Harbor. Kevin Lavelle with Harbor. Go to mizzen+main.com. Go to the Mizzen+Main stores. Go to one of their 1,000 locations. Buy the shirts. Buy the apparel, but with Harbor.
Yeah.
How do we support Harbor?
So our mission at Harbor is create happier parents and healthier families, one restful night at a time. We have a ton of free resources available at harbor.co and on all of our socials at Harbor Sleep. If those resources can be helpful to you as a parent, that's great. We hope that they are. You don't have to buy our product for us to be able to help you. If you want better sleep, if you want a better device, if you don't want to have to worry about the app on your phone that's not actually a baby monitor, check out Harbor. Regardless of whether you become a Harbor customer or not, throw away your baby biometric device. Don't strap a device to your kid to tell you whether or not they're breathing. It's dystopian. The American Academy of Pediatrics advises against it for a lot of good reasons. And those companies, Owlet and Nanit, have done a really good job at scaring the hell out of parents. And so Harbor's been on a mission to tell that story. I do it everywhere I can. It is a very scary thing to become a parent, and we're worried about our kids. I get it. There were several times I went in and tried to listen to him breathing because it's nerve-wracking. It's scary. But you need to take care of your kids and follow safe sleep guidelines. But children and infants are not so fragile that you can't trust that they can sleep. If you do all the right safe sleep guidelines and you've done everything you can, take care of your kids, take care of yourself, and enjoy this beautiful thing called life.
So the pricing journey of trying to figure this thing out. So where are you now?
So we came up with this lifetime membership, $5.99. We dropped the subscription, and it's worked very well. People have loved it. And while we're in the early innings of 2025 and there's tariff mania and things are changing, we're in the fortunate position that we have been able to lower the price to $4.99. Oh, yeah. And that puts us, at $5.99, especially with baby registries and everything else, I don't think that there is a ton of price insensitivity. But we just know the more people that can experience this product and that can experience the remote night nanny, the greater impact that we're going to have. And we're going to be able to grow this thing even faster and help even more parents. And so we did some messaging tests and we worked through some things and we ended up deciding to lower the price to $4.99. And the feedback on that has been even better. It wasn't that everyone was telling us it's too expensive. We didn't have some ringing data in our head. But based on what we saw in the market and based on what we knew that we were capable of, now that we're producing more product and our production lines are running and we're bringing more product in, and we're not impacted in the same way for now that so many other companies that make things in China because our product isn't made in China, we're able to lower the price, and the more parents that we can help, the better.
Kevin Lavelle, everybody.